If you look at crude right now, it's about $111 per barrel. At one point today, it was about $120 per barrel. These are extremely high prices, and this is going to motivate nation states to find alternatives, try to capitalize on whatever excess capacity they may have, and take advantage of where the market is right now, and prepare for the market to eventually reopen more and to have more flow after the Strait of Hormuz blockade is ended. Whether that is that blockade is ended this month, whether it's ended next month, or it's ended the month after that. But either way, prices are up, and historically, that has led in one direction. See, OPEC was created in the 1970s in order to make it so there could be a stable price that these nation states that primarily produce oil and supply the natural supply could then manage their economies off of and know that this is generally where price is going to be. And eventually they got it to $100 per barrel. Its most famous diplomatic engagement would be after the Yom Kippur War started. Any nation state that was supporting Israel was essentially cut out of the market, leading to massive increases in price from something like $3 to $12. It's really a real impact. And this was the United States' first big-time modern engagement with this type of price instability. And this motivated the United States to try to find alternatives outside of just relying on its entire international supply out of these Gulf states. And so while these Gulf states continued to work to control the price, have this type of, you could call it price fixing, you could call it price stability if you want to, make it sound better, to try to control the price of oil so that these nation states could better manage their economies and know exactly where it's going to be and have it in a more efficacious way for their markets, because the prices are therefore higher and they could produce less, but sometimes make more. And that obviously benefited them. But for the United States, who wanted lower prices, or for any other country that wanted lower prices, that is a problem. That was until the shale revolution, as there continued to be evolutions in, the collection of energy. And so as the shale revolution took off in the United States, they became much more influential in international production, until eventually the United States became the biggest producer in the world by an arm and a leg. And as America gobbled up more market share, OPEC tried its best to still stabilize prices. And so the way it would work is they would try to limit production in order to stabilize prices. America would expand production, gobble up more of the market share. Maybe some other countries would do this as well. And then OPEC countries would be punished essentially for following their old rules, because they had to keep their production low in order to, help the market stay at a higher price, while the United States didn't have any of these restraints on itself. And this is actually, this hypocrisy, this problem, this double standard when it comes to you follow the rules and in some ways you can get penalized for it. This has led to certain countries leaving OPEC over time. Ecuador is an example of this. Angola is an example of this. Even after OPEC Plus was created in an attempt for OPEC to establish dominance over the oil market by allowing in countries like Iran, even though it was a Saudi-led organization, allowing in countries like Russia, one of the largest producers in the world, largest country in the world, trying to bring in all these countries so they can agree on a stable price point, agree on where they should limit production to, so they can all benefit from higher prices. But the problem maintained that if you're outside of OPEC, these standards do not apply to you. The United States has no interest in being in OPEC, and so those standards do not apply to the United States. And so every single OPEC member could try to limit production, and the United States very well could just respond by saying, okay, let's take up more market share, let's make some money. You keep driving those prices up, and we'll keep selling more and more and more. And so for sacrificing none of its market share, for sacrificing no capital inflow, for sacrificing nothing at all, the United States actually benefited quite a lot from these attempts. Even if these price fixing, price setting, price stabilization efforts could hurt the consumer, as America gobbled up more market share, America's position in the energy market right now is quite dominant. is quite dominant. And so this has led to states like Angola, states like Ecuador, certain states leaving OPEC. But this issue has probably taken its biggest blow to date with the UAE announcing that they're going to be leaving OPEC. This is massive. This is massive for a few reasons. Number one, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, has been inside of OPEC since its inception. It has been in the organization for over like 50 years now. So if it's been in the organization for over 50 years, them leaving, they would not do it lightly. They would not do it, just to, see what it's at. We're going to test in out. They are making a decision that really speaks to the health of the organization, because there's influence that they got from being at the table. Even if the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia are kind of famously feuding in many ways, at the end of the day, the UAE did benefit from being at the table. But by being at the table, if they were not going to constantly cheat, and they were going to follow the rules, cheat like the Russians do in OPEC Plus, which that means they basically ignore these export controls, these export limits in order to make more money to fund the war effort. Why is it, if all these people are cheating, the United States is making more money, and the United Arab Emirates has quite a light product? There's like heavy crude, there's light crudes. They have a product that isn't that difficult to produce, while also having excess capacity that they could be exporting right now if it wasn't for the Strait of Hormuz blockade. So they looked at their position. They looked at their longstanding problems with the Saudis. They looked at the fact that the United States is going to just be gobbling up more and more market share, and other countries will gobble up more and more market share outside of OPEC, the more they try to lean into these types of controls. And while it doesn't have no impact, that impact burden is disproportionately felt now by them because of all these other states producing anyway. There's also the problem of the fact that they have about, I don't want to give just the UAE government's numbers, but they estimate something about $50 billion more money that they could be making if they just ignored these quotas, exported the fuel, and took advantage of the market situation. If they did, they would be making $50 billion every year. Now, let's say it's 30 billion. Let's say it's 40 billion. Hell, maybe it could even be more depending on where the prices go. But it's going to be more money. They will make more money if they export without consideration to OPEC rules. And not only will they make more money, they will make more money while there's an ability to make money, because you don't know where the market's going to go tomorrow. And at the same time, there is a possibility that the United States is pleased about this, that the United States wants lower energy prices. The United States has continued to develop its relationship with the UAE, with the United Arab Emirates, and it was the United States that recently provided an avenue for capital to get into the United Arab Emirates, despite the situation geopolitically it finds itself in right now. And as the Trump administration and the UAE has continued to develop a close relationship built upon the United States' previous relationship with the UAE, it could be believed that the United States might have been happy to see them go, and that this might be a move that also gets the United Arab Emirates maybe slightly more on Trump's good side, or slightly more on the good side of the United States, which wants to see lower energy prices. But a big factor that also has to be considered is that there's a war going on. And when there's a war going on, it's kind of hard to remove these situations from, well, the war that's going on. And in this case, there has been damage done to desalination plants in the region. There has been damage done to military infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, oil and gas infrastructure, terminals, oil terminals, like refineries, pipelines. So there has been a substantive amount of damage. There has been strikes throughout the Gulf region, including within the United Arab Emirates. Now, if you're an OPEC state, and you see where the prices are right now, and you know that in the future, especially if these technologies continue to advance and nation states continue to take advantage of them, which we have no reason to believe that it will not, or they will not, then why don't you get getting while the getting is good? Why don't you sell your product while you can now? I mean, excess capacity might be worth less in 50 years. And if you want to transfer your economy away from being an oil giant, from being known for your energy export, and that's it, you want to be known for tourism, you want to be known for technology, you want to be known for science and tech, you want to be known for, I don't know, anything else, aerospace engineering, it could be anything. But if you want to be known for those things, you got to get the capital to invest in those things. Like the Saudis had that plan, 2030. Now, obviously, those things will probably not be achieved by 2030, not only because of the war, but also just due to the sluggishness of the project. But the idea is there. The acknowledgement of a need to transfer away is there. And to transfer away and to have other pillars holding up your economy, you need capital. You need money. You need inflows to actually put the money somewhere. And that's where spending money right now comes in. Not only to invest in a diversified economy and that type of future for your country, but also to engage in repairs. These countries are going to have to fix some stuff after the damage done by this war. They're going to have to fix infrastructure. They're going to have to fix the oil and gas sector, which is currently funding, funding their budgets, funding their militaries, funding everything. And they're going to have to put money down. So I think that all these things came together, wanting to be, the relationship with Trump in the United States, the excess capacity that they can put out right now, the fact that they need money to invest in a different future, the fact that they need money in order to make the repairs that they need to make, the, animosity that the Saudis and the UAE have for each other. I mean, it's not like that these issues between the UAE and OPEC jumped out of nowhere. It's not like the issues with cheating and the fact that the Russians can get away with this, but the UAE can't get away with that. It came out of nowhere. But for it to happen right now, I mean, in some ways, it's going to actually dampen the effect of it because of the war, but it also just shows how much is changing, how much the dynamics of the war are straining previously strained relationships to the point of breaking, and how the war is having downward effects on a whole bunch of already existing, structural conflicts between the Saudis, the UAE, otherwise. Point is, the war is having an impact, and these structural issues for how OPEC manages world energy prices are only being worsened by the conditions of the war. It's being accelerated. OPEC's loss of influence as its method of price controls is not going to work after the shale revolution. So I think that when it comes to geopolitics, that this will have an impact on, that many of you should be paying attention to. Number one, price at the pump. When the Strait of Hormuz is eventually no longer blockaded, this is something where if they come in and they try to take up market share, they try to get product out to market, it can have a positive impact in bringing the prices back down. It will not have that impact right now, and it cannot have that impact until the war is over, but that is something that is obviously being considered. I think another impact that needs to be noted is the Russians. The Russians need the price of oil to stay over $100 a barrel if they have any dream of making this type of war economy lasting any much longer. If they have a dream of this war carrying on past the start of 2027, they're going to need more capital inflows. And it seems that the grain trade of stolen Ukrainian goods still has some problems, and it's not substantive enough to make up the difference anyway. They're already facing expanding Ukrainian bombardments against their refineries, against their export terminals, and against their oil and gas infrastructure as a whole. And they're not facing one strikes, they're not facing two strikes, they're facing rounds of like 3 strikes across like the same sites to make sure that they do enough damage against the most vulnerable components, many components of which have sanctions on them, and it'll be very expensive and sometimes arduous in order to replace them. This is already the conditions that the Russians are facing economically. They already have a budget shortfall that they're trying to figure out, and they need it to stay over $100 a barrel. And they need it to stay there if they have a dream of this war, this grinding war of attrition, being able to last into 2027, possibly into 2028, into this dream that the Russians have that one day the Russian front line will move forward and the Ukrainian front line will break. Well, that is dependent upon, since right now we're between $110 and $120, the United States continuing this war, the Iranians continuing this war, the Strait of Hormuz continuing to be blockaded, and there being no deal made on an atomic weapon, there being no deal made on the lifting of the blockade, and there being no deal made that could leave the United States and Iran not at each other's throats, or particularly not at each other's waterways at, the start of, I don't know, June, July. If something by that time comes into settlement, the Russians will have observed an inflow of cash. And this is also me assuming that the Trump administration, despite what Secretary Bessent said, will continue to renew the sanctions exemptions until at the very least, we have to be worried about them doing it past this point too, but at the very least, until the Strait of Hormuz is reopened. And that will mean billions upon billions of more dollars into the Russian war machine. But once that inflow of cash is done and we re-enter a somewhat normalized energy market, now with OPEC smaller, with OPEC losing its second most significant energy producer outside of Saudi Arabia, that's what the UAE has, with more than $1 million of barrel, like a million barrels more that they could be producing and putting out to market. That is going to see prices come down when the blockade ends and that new OPEC reality hits the market. That's going to see it going under $100 a barrel. And how low under $100 a barrel it will go, I do not know. It is not simply a hop, skip, and a jump to readjust the energy market overnight. It will take time, but I expect it to go double digits under $100 a barrel. And if it goes anywhere back to what it was before, then the Russians have a major problem. And if by some disaster for Moscow specifically, OPEC continues to deteriorate, the cheating of OPEC only increases because of the conditions of the war, due to nation states having to figure out how they're going to repair all their oil and gas infrastructure, how they're going to repair all the civilian damage, how they're going to rebuild their reserves. Cheating in OPEC could expand, or maybe you see other OPEC members start dropping out altogether, or OPEC plus, for whatever that matters.